everybody, and welcome to episode 68, I believe it is, of the Unchained Vodcast. I have, of course, myself here with Kriss and Brand as usual, and all of you lovely people with us today to talk about timing and fun in Camelot Unchained. Specifically, we want to look at the timing of certain events, travel
hmm
time, siege cap time for capping castles, destroying keeps, night capping, things of that nature. And whether or not some of these things are issues, how much they're issues, how they can maybe be addressed, but also kind of looking at these from the perspective of how long certain things take to do and whether or not that's still fun. And I should say is how long they might take to do, because obviously we don't know. We're still in
Right.
beta testing, which they did in a very recent weekday test, bring in some beta 2 backers into testing,
Yeah.
which I was excited about. Not because
Yeah,
I don't think it necessarily heralds the beginning of beta 2 or anything, as much as to hell with backer levels, honestly. At this point,
Right.
just get in whoever you can in tests. I don't care.
yeah. Get testers.
We need to get testers in. Um,
Yeah. I
I
mean, when it's
think
just
I think
alpha testers, there's like 20 of us at most.
I,
So
I
maybe.
don't I don't speak for all the alpha testers or the IT testers. I think we got our money's worth
I don't,
in
yeah.
testing exclusivity. I think at this point, let everybody in. Get as many testers as you can.
Yeah, I don't.
Us who have been testing for a long time, a lot of us are burned out a bit on testing. Get fresh eyes and fresh people testing.
Yeah, I really don't think there's much of anybody left testing at this point who cares about what your backer status is anymore and getting you in
Yeah.
tests. And honestly, if anyone does, screw those people. Uh, I
the
don't
only
care.
people who care are the people who don't get in. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, the only people who care don't test, so
The people who care enough to
or
test just want more people in testing.
yeah.
yes.
I admit I'm not exactly great about getting in testing. Most of the tests are during the week, and I can't really get in there. Sometimes I can't even make the wrap up because I'm in meetings during that time, like this week. Um,
hmm
but when I do get in, and there's only like 20 people in, that's kind of annoying.
Yeah. And most of the time that's the same for me. I'm at work when tests happen. So
hmm
It's usually the same 5 people there constantly, and then like
mm,
15 other people who are sometimes there, and then just random people.
Yep. So, with that being said, have a shot. Today we're going to talk about timing in different events, and I thought we would go ahead and start with night capping and siege because that's kind of what we went on a tangent about in the last podcast.
mhm.
And
hmm It's also what they're testing heavily right now.
well, the
Yeah.
siege battles to a certain degree, yeah,
Siege
yeah,
part. Yeah.
Yeah, Siege.
yeah. So I thought it would be good for we thought it would be good for us to go ahead and kind of expand on that and just start talking about that and all other matter of timing. So I thought it would be good for us to start with that and just kind of continue that conversation. So what I wanted to begin with is a pretty actually I won't say it's a simple question. It can be a complicated question, and that is night capping. Why is it a problem? Because there actually seemed to
uh,
be some disagreement about this last episode. So
Yeah.
I think in
Well,
this game, it's mostly a problem because of the player involvement in building what then gets night capped. And there's an
mhm.
investment level of player creativity and the player creation of going through the effort to build that thing and then have it just be completely demolished or taken away after you wake up the next morning, you know?
Especially with the
Um,
time it takes to build it.
yeah.
yeah, I would say for me, it's more a matter of actually interest in the game. In our last episode I brought up the example of Planet Side 2, and it was really the same case for Planet Side 1 as well. When I spend hours capturing a bunch of territory and keeps and bases and stuff, and then I log off for 4 hours and I come back and it's all been capped by someone else. It's
It takes a few
extremely
seconds to cap a base
it's
in Planet Fight 2.
yeah, yeah. I won't say it's disheartening. It's boring. It gets
Yeah.
boring after a while because it turns into just the same thing every single day. If I'm recapping the same keep every day,
Oh yeah.
I get so sick and tired of it really fast.
Yeah,
Same in
I mean,
ESO. The keep flipping was just insane.
Hmm.
Within a few hours, you could flip like 4 or 5 times.
yeah, and those are games where the examples of what you capture are pre-generated structures. There's no player investment
Yeah.
to actually creating them or time investment into finding the material to then support creating and building
Yeah.
this thing. When you actually built it, I think that boringness or that frustration and seeing it gone the next morning is just expanded and 10 times more potent.
Yeah, if I could never hold on to my keep that my guild built, and we're having to swap it back and forth every day, and so it's really
What's the
not
point in building
mine.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's the point in owning one at
Right.
that point? It's just a fort that exists on the server.
Yeah.
Um,
You spent days, weeks, sometimes depending on the size of it, gathering the materials,
mhm.
building it, and then to just flip it every 20 minutes.
Yeah, so
That gives no interest to building something that might be permanent.
yeah, so what I wanted to go into then is, what do you think are some reasonable solutions to this problem? Because I do think what it ultimately boils down to also is, we don't want to fix the problem by we don't want to, one, have a problem where people can come in the middle of the night and there's no one ever to defend, and so you never have
Mm.
battles where people are both defending
Yeah,
and people attacking. But you also don't want to fix the problem so much that happens on the other end and no one ever bothers to attack a keep because you can never cap it.
because it's so hard. Yeah. Um, well, night capping is always a problem because of time zones. So
Mhm.
having more people of different time zones, having less servers is already, for
Hmm.
me, a good way of preventing night capping because the less servers you have, the less spread out the population is. And so the more chances you have of having people of all time zones in the same server in different factions.
That's true.
Then the fact that they already said, I don't know how they're going to do it, but they said that capping a keep is not going to take a few seconds or a few minutes. It's going to be an involved process.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm still waiting to see what that process will be.
Yeah.
But
My
there's
understanding,
a happy medium in there.
yeah, my understanding right now is short of a time gate that they're looking purely at kind of damage output versus repairability output in a keep. That the damage will be more than how much can be repaired in a time frame of the battle, and they'll be playing around
Yeah.
with the numbers of how much damage a siege actually does.
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think one of the things they can do with regard to that is they can look at what, and we're going to talk about travel time later, so I don't want to push us too much into it, but they can look at what the average travel time is for someone who logs in to the game. How long does it take? Would it take them to get to a keep to defend it? And then say, okay, the average attacking force shouldn't be able to get through the outer walls before they can get there to defend it. So maybe they get
Yeah.
there right as the outer wall crumbles, but there at least is someone getting there to defend the keep and fight over it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me should be part of the equation, so that at the very least, if you're not there, you're not in the island or whatever, but you find out your keep's being attacked, you can be like, people get on, and then some people get on, they travel there. The keep may be already half jacked up by the time they get there, but they can at least have
Yeah.
a shot at getting there and making some kind of a battle over it.
Yeah. One thing they're doing, which we can talk about now that Mark has officially said, "Hey, you can talk about this,"
Yeah.
is they're messing with resilience and durability of the actual blocks of the keeps. So some tests we're noticing we can destroy the keeps very quickly. In some tests, we're noticing that it's taking a lot of just repetitive blasting the keep with a siege weapon to do any kind of visual damage to it, and they're messing with those variances.
Yeah, and I definitely think that will be a big part of it, because it is a matter of how long it takes to take out a wall. But they've
Mm.
also mentioned that they would like, for instance, siege ladders to be a thing. Things like siege
Mm-hmm.
ladders or siege towers. And so I think some other things they can do is just making sure that a too small of a force can't cap a keep. Which they've talked about having NPC guards. I think it should be relatively simple to have it so that your keep can have NPC guards if, say, it's below a certain number of live defenders. You have fewer than 10 people in the base live. You have NPC guards that help keep people off the walls and things of that nature. They could also simply. We know that there's going to be different size plots, and probably there will be different tiers. I'm thinking there'll be different tiers of keeps. There'll be a small, medium, maybe a large, maybe bigger than that. We don't know. So assuming maybe there's like 3 tiers of keeps, maybe more, they could simply have it be that based on the tier or the size of your keep, you need a certain number of people to actually cap it in the first place. So if you attack a small keep, maybe you only need 10 people to cap it. But if you're attacking a medium keep, you might need 15, or if you're attacking like a large keep, you may need 20 people in a group, just to make sure that a group of like 5 people can't show up, evade, or kill the NPC guards, sneak inside, and then go, oh, look, we capped the keep, ha ha, and then we sneak off and run away.
Right. And that's tough, too, because we've seen the trebuchets, which are, I would imagine, the longer range siege. Mm-hmm. They can shoot from one side of the map to the other in current tests at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how NPCs in any kind of automation process really play any factor in it, when you can be half a mile away, it seems, from the keep and just bombard it from way out there and not really take any retaliation.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's okay. I actually don't mind the idea of having siege that can bombard a keep from long distance, because I think it's a good idea to try to draw out the melee people to go and attack them. So that you're not just standing behind the keep and going, nope, I'm defending, I'm here. But you actually have to try to move out and try to engage them in the field. I think that's probably fair.
As far as says, longer and harder to build should be longer and harder to cap.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking here, is if it's a higher tier plot or keep, then maybe it should take a larger group to cap it, just to prevent some of that night capping issues where, oh, I've got 10 people, I killed your NPCs, and now I'm inside your keep, and I just cap it, and then I laugh, and then I walk off. The other thing I was thinking of, and I don't know where Kriss kind of vanished to, but the other thing I was thinking of is kind of a twofold thing, because one of the things we don't want to do that we discussed we didn't want was, we don't want people to have to sit there for hours to cap a keep. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Once you get in it, you don't want people to just sit there on a keep for 2 hours to cap it. That would be, it would just be ridiculous to have somebody have to get inside of a keep and just sit there too long to cap it. But what I thought of instead is maybe they could make a distinction between capping a base and controlling a base. So you can cap a base in, maybe say you've broke through the walls, you defeated the defenders, you got to the control point. It takes you maybe 10 minutes of defending it to cap it if you have enough people for that tier, that size of base. You manage to cap it, then it goes neutral. It doesn't go into your control, it just goes neutral. And then maybe depending on the tier of that plot, there's a certain amount of time that it takes before you can actually gain control over it. So if it's a small plot, it might be an hour, it might be 2 hours, where essentially you may not have to stand right on it, but you have to stay at least in the area to defend it, because if the people who actually own it come back and take it over, they may be able to recap it in like an hour and just completely switch it back to their side. Or if it's a medium keep, maybe it takes 2 hours or 3 hours. If it's a big keep, maybe it takes even longer, just to make it so that attacking and sieging a keep isn't like isn't a 10-minute affair. It doesn't have to be like a 4-hour affair, but if you want to actually control that keep, you have to invest more time into at least protecting the general area, chasing people out and making sure they can't counterattack. But perhaps to keep it from being super boring, maybe you can salvage materials and things from the keep. So you can't like control NPCs and just control it, but you can start, maybe there's like a way to actively salvage from it and start stripping materials and going, okay, well, we're carrying this stuff back to our base.
MJ said about that destroying a keep will take less time, but you zero resource,
Yeah.
while harvesting a keep
Right.
will take a lot longer because you will need to take the time to actually harvest the resources. So it's going to be taking much longer to harvest a keep and to try to get something out of it aside from the territory than just destroying it.
And yeah, to answer Grimslag's question, I would be absolutely willing to have guild-wide phone alerts. Um, I would say our guild basically actually has a rule for this. Our community has a rule for this.
True.
Where I wouldn't want something automated by the game, where the game itself can go, your keep is under attack, and it alerts everybody, unless there was a way for them to toggle that on and off. And I don't know that I'd want to require people to have it toggled on, because
Yeah.
that can be obnoxious. But we have our own methods, and we have our Discord and everything, and we have
Yeah.
rules in there that basically, if the leadership says like stuff is going down and you need to get on to defend the keep, we can send out announcements to everybody and
Well,
be like,
you're
if
gonna
you're
be
able to get on, you're supposed to be on.
the API for the UI itself is accessible to anybody to do mods, and they were talking about a phone companion app being developed either by the backers, by the players,
In fact, we were planning on doing an episode
or
this
by
season
them.
about it.
But yeah, that could be one of the features. Your keep is under attack. Um, you have the time, like there. The moment that the walls start taking damage, it should give the alert, and then give enough time for people to actually get to the keep to defend it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, Svarty, I kind of agree with what you're saying. Like, I guess what I'm envisioning is maybe the process of beating down the wall and getting into the keep is time consuming, but I also don't want people to have to sit out in the field and bombard a keep for 3 hours to get through the wall, because
Yeah.
that could be really boring too. So what I'm kind of saying is, I feel like they can split the difference a little bit. They can have the process of getting through the outer wall take some time, and it should take time, maybe at minimum equivalent to how long it generally would take to travel there to defend it.
Hmm.
So a smaller keep, they're probably going to be like getting inside by the time the defenders get there in mass or something.
Hmm.
If they're not in the area already, um, and but then for bigger keeps it's going to take longer. But then you cap it, you turn it neutral, so it's not benefiting your enemies. But maybe it takes a lot longer to flip it and gain actual control over it. Now, that doesn't necessarily
And
mean that you have to sit there. Just you have to keep other people from taking it back.
Right.
yeah, and not not just that, like because a lot of the night capping problem is also you do a PV door basically with a small group of attackant, and you just cap it really fast. What I would like to see is also based on the size of the keep, requiring more people inside of it to cap it. So the bigger you make the keep, the
Right.
more defensible you make the keep, the more people you will need inside the keep to cap it.
Yeah.
Giving more time also for other attacking, for the defenders to come back and attack it. That's in the Division 2 you have kind of like that for the mechanics for what they call the control points. You attack the control points, you clear the enemies, you kill the boss, and then you have a round of defense of the attack point. And only when you successfully defend the point do you actually take control of it. And during that process, the attackers, while they're capturing the keep, should not be able to repair it, only when they take control of it. So it means any damage they've done to the keep to get inside means the defenders that come back to prevent them from capping in when they enter the keep is still open. So capping becomes a lot harder and a lot more. It takes a lot more involvement. It's not even a question of time. It has to take some time to allow the defenders to come back, but it should take more involvement than time.
I do think that I'm not opposed to the idea of having outside objectives that people have to capture before they can capture a keep. My only problem with it is that I feel like what that likely leads to is people intentionally skirting that. And what I mean by that is you actually saw that in TSO a lot. People would move up to it. There wasn't an alert that went out until you got the walls to a certain level.
Yeah.
So people would just go up and bombard the keep till it's at that
And
level.
go to another one.
And then they set out the alert when they're ready. But they basically would just edge it till it's right there. So what they could do is just sneak around that outer thing, ruin the wall until it's exposed, then go set off the objective outside, cap that. By the time the defenders get there, they're already rest of the way through the wall. Now, they could set it so an alarm goes off for either one, of course. But it's just like, I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't have a problem with an outside objective. It's just, one, it's kind of hard to justify to some degree. Like, okay, well, we're making up a reason why you have to cap something else to cap the fort. So it wouldn't be my first objective, but if that's the only way that they felt like they could kind of stagger it to kind of add some more time buffer to it, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I think the scouts come into play there a little bit as well in being able to update maps and possibly have an alert feature built within any kind of system that they're integrated with, and being able to say, hey, we saw a large group here, just so everyone knows there's a group out there capping things or trying to, and this is where the last place we saw them is, and more player alert based rather than automated. But still having some sort of automation there too.
Yeah, I do think that is something they'll have to work out, is the like Grimslag said, having NPC guards can do auto alerts, but then how do we balance that with scouts, which we know are coming eventually? I do think that maybe the NPC guard should do an automated alert, but it's like a very late alert type thing. You shouldn't be getting that as soon as someone attacks. They'll eventually send an alert out, but a scout would probably be able to alert you way sooner if they're in the area.
True.
Or maybe even just having a
scout
scout in the area
could even alert you
might
even before they arrive that they're on the way.
Well, that's true as well. You can have scouts that are tracking their movements.
That's another thing that could prevent night capping. Guard towers, guard posts that are basically a first automated alert when the enemies either pass or attack that guard post. That's when you get the alert, not when they are at the walls, but when they pass that first defense perimeter that you can set up closer or farther from the walls.
Yeah, and we know that there's going to be we know that potentially there'll be different types of upgrades you can have within a keep for larger keeps and stuff. So that could be a potential type of upgrade, is like something like a watchtower, which might increase the automated alert that you get from NPC guards. It might make it go faster as opposed to waiting longer, things of that nature. There's a lot of different things they could do with that to try and help against the night capping issue.
You were talking about the neutrality factor and capping, going from controlled to neutral to then controlled by someone else. And you've seen that in some other instances in like World of Warcraft, specifically in Hellfire Peninsula. There was a PvP zone where you had to go capture 3 different places, and it went from controlled to neutral to then controlled by the other faction. And you can set that to be perhaps tied into the size of the structure. So the bigger the structure, the longer that neutrality time factors in, and it's just automated based off of the size of the structure.
Yeah, and that could even be where, like Kriss mentioned, that they've mentioned that destroying a keep is going to take less time potentially than, or did I get that backwards? Than capping it. My head hurts today.
Destroying it will be quicker than harvesting it.
Harvesting it.
Yeah.
And that could maybe be. My thoughts are that destruction versus harvesting period can be when it's neutral. You can destroy something that's the enemy's keep, of course, by bombarding it, but you can't do like an active just destruction method necessarily. Like basically, I guess what I'm saying is once you take it to a neutral state, maybe you can decide to either harvest it, or you can actually have people just sit there and start wailing on it, even when it's neutral,
or repair it
to continue to
or
destroying
repair
it. Or maybe they can use resources to repair
No,
it.
the repairing
Um,
should be only when you take control of it, not when it's neutral.
I kind of agree. Just because
And Mark said about that basically.
Yeah.
that would make it easier for people who own the keep to actually recapture it as well.
Mm.
Because that's kind of the idea is, okay, they can flip my keep to neutral, but they shouldn't be able to completely, it should take a while for them to completely ruin it or to even
Yeah.
take control and put more NPCs in there and stuff. So it's easier for me to get it back as long as I do it within a reasonable period of time.
Yeah.
And like, so that if they're just, and it kind of actually works against the Zerg mentality too, where people want to hit a point, capture it, move, hit a point, capture it, move, hit a
Yeah.
point, capture it, move with their giant Zerg balls. And it's difficult to do that when, if they do that and move on, we can easily send 20 people behind them, cap the keep back,
And just
go,
recap it. Yeah.
okay, it's ours again. Now we rebuild
Yeah.
the walls. Come back if you really want to.
Yeah. And I talked to Mark about this at one point. The damage output of the sieges is intended to be more than the repair output trying to fix it in the process of both things happening at the same time.
Which is
like-
which is understandable.
Yeah. If the siege is hitting the wall, you cannot repair it as quickly as the damage being
Well,
done to it.
you shouldn't
But-
be. We talked about it, but yeah, while you're being attacked, you should be able to build stone walls while you're being hammered with the siege engines.
Well, he says you can
wooden
actually
structures-
repair the wall. He insinuated, I
Okay.
wouldn't say that he said that. He insinuated you can try to repair the wall as it's being damaged, but at a slower rate. But in a static situation where there's no damage being done, you can repair faster than you would in the other situation.
Yeah.
So
I do agree with Sfarty. I do think that the defenders should be incentivized to have to go out and try to destroy
not
the
to hunker
siege,
down.
not to just hide within the keep.
Yeah.
And I think having siege like the trebuchets that are longer than anything else can practically destroy them would be a method for that. Now we know that mages are going to have like the longest range of anything, so probably as long or longer than siege. So that kind of comes into a problem of, well, couldn't a bunch of mages just destroy the siege? But I would think that counter mages could easily put up barriers and things in front of the siege to prevent them from being easily destroyed by long range mages, which would then force the defenders to come out and have to engage them and distract them. And
yeah, there's such a fine balance to figure this out that they're going to have a huge task in figuring out, because part of, and we've talked about this in PvP, just player versus player, like how did the tank come off as being like threatening? How does siege come off being threatening? And that's by dealing a lot of damage and genuinely being worried that if the more siege that there are out there, that you have to do something about them.
And that's why I actually feel like things like siege ladders would actually be extremely important to the game, because if you're just worried about trebuchets, then that's very one-dimensional. You can go, okay, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah.
They're going to come up with trebuchets. They're going to do this thing. We don't really have to worry about their fighters unless we actually go out there and destroy the trebuchets. But then if the
our
fighters
mage can destroy the trebuchets from inside the castle almost.
But if the fighters start walking up with a giant siege ladder or a siege tower that they're pushing their way up there, you suddenly have to go, okay, which one do we shoot? Do we shoot the trebuchet or do we shoot the siege ladder? Or do we send people out melee for one, and then it just increases the dynamic that could possibly happen there.
And then how long does it take to destroy a trebuchet if those are the most damaging and potent things to the destruction of the keep itself? There's the balance of killing those and how much damage is being done to the wall. It's going to be tough.
There's a lot of factors there, and so one thing to kind of consider on this is travel time. I mentioned the suggestion that maybe the time to breach like a standard keep wall or an average keep wall, or like a weaker keep wall, not like a tiny house, but like a weaker castle wall. Maybe the average time for a reasonable sized, not huge, but a reasonable sized force to destroy that wall with siege should be equal to the about the time it takes for people to log into the game and get to that keep in general.
Yeah.
So how do we first of all,
it depends on where you logged off.
How long should it take? How long should it take someone if they log in at the safe zone to get to a battle? if we assume that might be how long it takes for someone to break through the outer wall of a keep.
It's a very variable question.
I have an answer for myself, but I want to see what your answers are.
If you're at the safe island, to get to your keep, if your keep is 2, 3, 4 islands in, it's going to take a lot longer than.
Is it?
I think.
I actually don't think it necessarily has to be, but
I would say a good average. If you take the map and just call it a circle for the sake of calling it a circle, the distance between the outer edge to halfway to the circle, because there should be a point in which you just can't get there in time. That you guys have gone so far deep into discovering the map and connecting it that you really have to be a lot closer to get involved.
Well, I will say they have kind of implied
decisions and consequences.
They have kind of implied that ships will be able to provide faster transport between islands.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And so I'm kind of working on the theory that if you take a ship from your starter island to get to the inner row of islands, it's going to take longer than like the next island. But how much longer? Like, does it take 10 minutes longer? That would be crazy to sit on a boat for 10 minutes.
Right.
If it don't, but if it only takes 1 minute longer, that's still kind of important. It kind of sucks to sit there on the boat for 1 minute, but it's
1 minute is nothing.
1 minute's not that bad, really. Versus going to a close island, which might take you like 20 seconds. For me, I guess for me,
I don't think we're gonna count in seconds.
I guess for me,
unless you're at just outside the wall of the safe island, the harder I in my opinion, the farther you go inside, the closer you are to Camelot, the longer it's gonna take you to get there. And if you are really deep in enemy territory, you've taken a lot of land. Logging off at your capital city means you can't get to the front line in time.
That's going to lead to a lot of people being really bored.
Yeah, you should take the risk of logging off in a player-built castle, which means you might log off in enemy territory.
And then what happens if someone takes your keep and you get logged back in the safe zone? And then you can't make any battles because it takes you an hour to travel to the inner circle.
That's a big problem. That's why we're having this conversation, because timing is very picky here.
If I can, maybe I should instead just start by suggesting what I'm thinking.
Sure.
Because as somebody did point out, I missed it here somewhere, but there's a lot of Svarty said there's no constant number for this, and so I will point out that I'm talking about averages. You know, if all they can really plan for is averages. They can say, okay, the average size battle group is this. They might have this many siege. A wall of this tier castle will have this much health, and then from that, everything is going to vary. So they have to base it on a certain average. And for me, what I picture as being a model that might work, to allow people to have to deal with travel time being a real factor, but still not to the degree that it completely just says, oh, I logged in the game and I never get to play because it takes me an hour to get to the battle. They could have ship travel from like the safe island or from any island to another island, take an average of, say, 1 to 3 minutes, depending on how far the distance is. So maybe if you're going from one dock to another dock, I'm not talking about walking time, not including walking time to get to the dock, but just from the dock to another dock, it takes you, if it's a close island, it takes you like 40 seconds, maybe a minute. If it's really far in, it takes you maybe 3 minutes to actually ride in the boat for 3 minutes and just wait to get there. Once you get there, how big is the island and how far do you have to walk on that island to get to the keep? Now, that to me, that's where the travel time comes in, because that's when people can actually intercept you. They can actually engage you in open world PvP. On the boat, we don't have naval combat, so we might as well not even consider that right now. It's not important. So they can't. There's no PvP on the water, so there's no point sitting in the water for a long period of time. Once you get on the land, in my mind, the islands, we've seen the example map from years ago. All the islands near the safe zones were the bigger islands. All the islands to the interior were smaller. So what they could do is they could base it and say, okay, you're going to spend maybe 5 minutes walking to a dock. Then you spend 1 to 3 minutes riding on the boat to get to whatever island you need to get to. Then to walk from the dock to the battle to the other side of the island for one of the ones in the outer period might take you an hour, because that actually benefits the defenders because they can start there. Whereas Zerg swarms, that means they have to travel, they have to cross the whole island. The defenders aren't going to have to cross the whole island. So maybe one of the close by bigger islands, it might take like an hour to walk from end to end of the island. Then you go into the next larger islands. Maybe it takes 45 minutes to walk one end of the island to the other end of the island. And then the next ones further in, it takes more time to get there by boat, but the islands are smaller.
Right.
So it only takes maybe 30 minutes to cross the entire island. Now, again, I'm just picking numbers out of the air.
Yeah.
But that to me is a way that they could maybe structure it so that there is still a problem. You have to take more boat time to get there. But the battles are mostly going to be in those interior islands, and maybe the second tier. So we can say maybe 20 to 30 minutes of walking across the island to get to a battle. You spend maybe 2 minutes to 3 minutes if they really want to push it up, maybe 5 minutes on a boat riding there in the first place, which would then mean that in order to break through a reasonable sized keep's wall with siege should take an average of about 35 minutes if no one is defending it. Just 30 minutes of PV door to break through a wall and take the keep.
Well, to get in the keep.
To get in the keep.
actually claim it.
To get to the keep.
I mean, to break the keep, because we're talking about travel from when the alarm goes off. The alarm goes off. How long does it take defenders to get there to make some kind of a battle if they're not in the area?
It's also gonna depend. That's the thing. We keep the hard part is gonna be we keep thinking of generated castles, so things that the devs created.
Not really, but go ahead.
How you get into a castle is going to depend on how it's going to get built.
Yeah.
If you have a keep, a large keep that has 3-4 layers of walls,
I think they're going to have to do something to limit that.
Well, it's going to be the number of cubes you have in the plot.
Yeah,
but you can decide you can decide to all focus on the walls and not so much on the interior elements. Or you can do the other way around. But I don't think we should think of standardized, that there's going to be a standardized time to take a keep. Once you're in the keep, it should be standardized depending on the size. But to get inside, to start the process of actually claiming it, that's the part where it's going to vary, and that's going to be up to the players and the investment you want to put in the keep. That's going to determine how long it takes to actually breach the walls.
I do think that they're going to have to they're going to have to figure out a way to limit the amount of like walls and defenses you can have, because no one's going to want to siege a keep that literally has 3 walls they have to break through to get into the keep. It's not going to happen. People are going to start sieging that, and they're just going to go, this is stupid. And if you can't build solid walls, all they're going to have to do is break in once before they know the layout of your walls, and then they know where to attack it again. So trying to be tricksy and maybe building some walls with multiple barriers or something, it's not going to work, because once they get in once, they're just going to go, okay, what is the layout of this stupid castle? All right, we drew it out. It's never going to bug us again. We know where to hit it.
But that's the risk you're willing to take if you build it like that.
Yeah, but that just means that after a while, no one's going to do that anymore, because they realize, oh, people can figure this out really quickly by just taking it once. And all they have to do is, I think all they have to do is, honestly, is differentiate the types of blocks. They could have a type of block for wall and a type of block for everything else. And the wall blocks have way more health, but are extremely expensive. And then that limits the amount of walls you can have.
Yeah. I think at the moment, their health system for blocks is based off of the type of block itself, wood versus stone versus something more. So...
Yeah, so I do think that they will have to, like I said, again, we're talking averages, but I do think that in order to make any meaningful calculations on this stuff, they have to create an average of what they think the average is going to be.
Yes.
And that question comes down to how long do they want? One, do they want people to be able to get to a keep and at least try to defend it before someone can cap it if they're not on the island to begin with? And two, if they don't want to do that, how do they deal with night capping when people can be in another time zone and not be on the island? Defenders might not be on the island. And then three, if they do want to do that, what is that travel period? What time period do they want people to have to spend in transit to get there? To me, I think a reasonable time period is maybe 35 minutes. If you're logging in, you're traveling there. If you're already on the island, that means it's only going to take you 15 minutes to walk there. Maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes to walk there. But if you're not on the island, you have to worry about a boat getting to the dock and then maybe walking halfway across the island to get to where the battle is.
I think the answer to that is simply the question of how long is it? How long is too much before you decide I'm not even going to bother?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was actually going to say
that's the point.
I was actually going to save this question for last as kind of my fluff question, but I'll go ahead and ask it now. How long are all of your usual gaming sessions in an MMO?
I'd say 2. It's been a while actually since we've all played an MMO together in our community. But when we were playing, let's say SWOTOR, I think was SWOTOR and ESO were the last 2 big ones. 2 hours was probably an average. Yeah, as Farty said, 2 to 3 hours might be an average.
And if you have to spend an hour of that traveling to a battle, and then you immediately die within 5 minutes.
Right. Oh no, yeah. I agree that it's going to be a tricky question and a tricky thing to get right, so it's still fun. But
I'm seeing a lot of 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I do think that's the
on weekends or on my days off, I can have 4 to 5 hour sessions.
Yeah. Now,
that's,
Now that being said,
once a week, twice a week.
Keep battles are not the only type of battle that can happen, and that should be pointed out. But to be if you're logging on to try to counter siege, to try to get out there and stop someone from capping your base, which if I build a castle and I build this massive castle for in my guild, we build this huge castle, and I find out it's being attacked, I want to be able to log on at 11 o'clock at night and get there and have a chance to defend it before it's capped. And if I can't do that, I'm probably going to get pretty pissed off pretty quick.
Oh yeah, no, you need to have the opportunity. Yeah, you need to have the opportunity.
Even if it's already kind of wrecked by the time I get there, I at least want the chance for 30 of us to show up and get there and fight for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that time point is varied based per person and per person. What is that time limit to you? Like, you get a notification. Let's say your keep's now under siege. At what point do you say, I'm not going to bother because it's going to take too long to get there?
If it's for me, it's not so much a matter of time as it is if I can get there. If I could get there, if I know that as soon as I get the notification, I log in. And I travel, and I can get there like right before the walls fall. That's sufficient to me. I can go, okay, we can at least get there, and we can start trying to set up some kind of a defense before the walls go crumbling down, and then we can at least contest the keep.
Yeah.
So to you, it doesn't matter what the time is.
For most people, it's not so much a question of time, but of thinking you can have a chance of defending your keep. Yeah. By the moment you get the alert, you don't have time to get there, and you can't do anything about it. That's just a frustration, and that's not fun.
Yeah, because if there's no chance of me actually successfully defending it, I'm not going to bother. I will say there is a time limit too. I mean, if it took me an hour to get to a keep, I'm not going to want to log on at 11 o'clock at night and then spend an hour traveling to get there. To not be able to then maybe be able to defend the keep, and
at the same time, we're thinking in a very linear way. Supposedly, hopefully, CU is going to be a lot more organic in terms of battles and in terms of points to defend. You won't, as Farty said, we're assuming that everybody's going to log off at the sanctuary.
Nope.
I don't think so. I'm gonna log off if I want to fight. I'm gonna log off as close to the front lines as I feel safe to do,
I'm
which is probably going to be an island away or something like that. So I can get to the battles faster than somebody who's at the back lines and will have to travel all the way to the front lines.
I'm actually assuming that water travel won't take very much time at all, and that the majority of travel time will be on land travel, which then means it really won't matter what island you're on unless you happen to be on an island very close to that one, and you can just literally hop over the water and keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, if we could log out of the game anywhere, like we don't have to be in a safe spot to log out. We can just walk into a forest and log out. I would just put myself in the middle of known, controlled Arthurian territory, for my case, but whatever faction you are in, just the middle of your controlled territory. That way, when you log in, hopefully you're still somewhere in the middle. And then you have an equal chance to go around.
And I do think that organized guilds are going to do that. Like I've mentioned before in some of our episodes, the way I look at it is likely we'll have alliances. And alliances will likely involve, okay, our people and your people are going to try to defend these couple of islands. The rest of you go defend those couple of islands. And we'll swap back and forth if really needed. But right now, that's your area. This is our area. And so we'll largely be within a cluster of islands and logging on and off within those so that we're close by what we need to be defending. I don't know. What it really comes down to is, are they going to have us doing a considerable amount of riding on a boat or a considerable amount of walking on land?
I would be okay with boat travel being fast if the docks can be captured. And so a smart enemy will go and capture the dock to prevent you from docking in this island and make you walk longer to get to the siege.
I think maybe what they should do with that is make it so that the docks can be captured, but it doesn't prevent you from traveling there. So your boat can arrive. They're immediately waiting there to kill you if you get off the boat, but you can get there on a boat. The reason I say that is because ultimately I think they're likely going to have to script the boat travel to a large extent. They're going to have to say, here's a point. Even though we can build points anywhere else, I think they're probably going to either have to place the docks or they're going to have to give us something where we can place them ourselves. But most likely they're probably going to have to pre-build the docks for us on each island and where they would be. So just looking from development time and how much time has been spent and everything else, I don't see how they'll have time to make docks just be able to be anywhere. So I think they'll likely have to be like, there's a dock, here's how you get to the island, you ride to this dock. So if the enemies can block us from being able to land there at all, that is potentially really problematic. But if we can get there and they can murder us as we get off the boat, well, they can kind of still do what you're talking about. They can essentially blockade our dock and then just bombard us with trebuchets.
Well, they can force you to dock
unless there's multiple docks at least.
The next island over, and there's another way to cross from an island to the other. The bridge, there's a bridge, and so you have to dock. You can still dock an island over, but cross the bridge, so you walk longer. And so it increases your travel time.
But then how do we get to islands that haven't been captured or are attracted yet?
You can't dock to, I would say you can't take a boat to an island you don't control.
Yeah, exactly.
Then how do you get to the island?
Through the control points.
They have bridges.
Stabilizers.
But how do you get there to activate the stabilizer in the first place?
You have to walk to those ones.
So you're saying you can attract an island from a stabilizer on your island you already control. You can zoom it over to another island and be like pulling it towards you.
That's how it works.
No, there's going to be.
But then what if they're doing the same
thing? To island.
They're pulling it their direction. You're pulling it your direction. How do you
questions? Let's save that one for Friday. What happens when two opposing factions are trying to stabilize islands together simultaneously?
True.
I just don't see how. Let me rephrase this. I've always pictured stabilizers working this way. You get to an island, you take over a stabilizer, then you turn it on and it begins moving it towards your islands, which implies you have to have a way to get to that island in the first place.
I would think the other way around, meaning you go to a stabilizer on this island that is linked to the next island over that starts putting this one towards yours.
And then once it's
The
connected,
next one
you
over
can
rather than the one
go
it's on.
across.
My problem with that is it then
And let you
implies
go across
that
after that.
my problem with that is it then implies that you can't fight over an island until it's connected to your island. So then you automatically have an advantage there. But then that also, if it's connected to your islands, the enemies aren't connected, and so they can't get to it. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Someone would be not connected to the island.
More information we don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Svarty was messaged me here with the system you're proposing. The time travel would be about the same as long as you are not on the same island getting attacked. Yeah, that's kind of the point. That would mean that every time a keep gets attacked, most of the defenders will always get there right before it falls, which would feel kind of bad. I don't see how that. I mean, I guess it could feel bad to get there
agree
right
with
before it
Svarty on that.
falls. But what's the alternative? Getting there after it falls? I think that would feel worse. That you'd never keep out on the edge. You never have a chance to get there.
You have to log off or camp closer to the front lines because
then why would you ever log in if you get something attacked that's further away?
Well, if they're in your territory, there's other spawn points. Any keep controlled by your faction, by your realm, should be a spawnable area, which means if they attack you deep in your territory, they can be attacked from the back. But I think it would be a bad design if logging off at your capital city means you can still go on the front lines and be there before they capture your keep. That should not be possible.
I disagree. I think that would be ideal.
I think that would be a bad design, and that would not encourage people to build to attack farther than anywhere. Anywhere is going to not be an advantage.
I think
there's no tactical advantage then.
I think there is because this is how I would see that unfolding, if I can. They have a large force amassed. If they're sieging a keep, they should have a large force amassed to siege it, unless it's a small keep. Now, they get in there, they siege the keep, they get it down to almost destroy the wall, almost destroyed, and your forces arrive to defend it. How many forces are you likely to have been able to rally and get there in time to defend that keep? People who immediately logged on, got on a boat, went across, started moving across to get there. You're probably going to, if you're an organized guild, you can maybe get a strong force there that might hold them off. But most likely, if they're attacking it with a sizable force, they're already organized, they're in place, they're bombarding the keep. You now don't have walls. You likely don't have NPCs now. Most likely, they have the advantage. They're already at your walls and trying to push their way in. Now, admittedly, this does assume an average size keep. So if you have like a tier 3 keep or something, which kind of counters something Svarty was saying about you getting there right before it falls every time. If you have a larger keep, you're going to get there before it falls because that's the point of a larger keep. A bigger, more extensive keep, it's going to take them longer to get through the walls. So what I envision happening with the average size keep, you would get there right before it falls with probably a modest force to try to defend it. You're likely not, in my mind, not going to be able to defend it if they've got a decent attacking force, because you're just grabbing whoever's around and trying to get there, unless you already have a group put together and you're running around.
But if you can get people that are stationed at the main city, it means you basically have your whole realm that can get there on time to defend the keep.
Yes, because pugs absolutely do what you tell them to do all the time. When you go, hey guys, come defend my keep, it's being attacked.
But that works for both ways.
But they've had time to put that group together. That's my point. You're just grabbing whoever will come with you at that moment and saying, let's go. Unless you already have a raid together, which is just credit to you at that point. What this does to me, in my mind, is you get to the keep, you fight over it. They may likely still take it because they are better organized than you. They should be if they're taking your keep.
Mm-hmm.
And you get there, you get defeated. Now you're on the island. They get to the next keep. you're already there at the next keep, and you've been pulling in people who have been getting there the entire time this first battle is happening. The first one's really more of a stopgap measure. Unless they're just really disorganized, I don't think you're likely to get enough people to stop them from capping it. But then you're prepared for the next battle, so you can actually continue to contest the entire island and maybe take back your keep, go back and forth and see what happens.
It's all moot because it depends on you getting onto the game in order to do it, and not everyone will. And
well, exactly, and that's kind of my point. It's whoever you can get on in that
and
minute.
I get your point,
there.
and I agree with your point, but I still think being able to get to the front lines from the safe city, taking as much time as if you were camping on the front lines, I think would be, for me, it's bad design, and it negates any type of tactics you would have in choosing what keep to attack and where to attack it. It would not be any safer to attack a keep that is closer to your front lines than it is to attack a keep deep in enemy territory then.
It depends on how long the boat travel takes and how long it takes you to get to the docks in the first place.
Well, if it takes the same time to get from the main city to the front lines, if you're 3 or 4 islands deep, than it is if you're just next to their safe city. I don't know. For me, that negates any terms of distance.
Because again, I think the alternative is you're talking about riding on a boat and just sitting there for 10 minutes.
No.
If you're going from the safe zone to an outer, to one of the inner
if
islands,
you're trying to get the boat
for 10 minutes.
Well, first the boat shouldn't be able to take you from the safe city to the front lines.
Oh, well, now you're talking about traveling for at least more than an hour to get there, because you have to go to a dock and then travel across the island to the next dock, and then hop island to island. That's going to be crazy.
For me, it's one scenario. It's talking about if you're in the safe city, your capital city, you should not be able to go to the front line 3 or 4 islands over.
I disagree.
You should be able to get there, but not in time.
Islands.
Not in time for you to defend the keep that is that far in enemy territories.
Then there would be no point in even trying, because going on land and crossing the island on foot is going to take way longer than a boat would take to go around the island.
Then the boat should be taking longer.
And then at that point, you also have to consider the pug issue, which you mentioned. Well, we can call the pugs and get them to come here. What pugs are going to try to come help you if it's going to take them an hour to get to that part of the map if they're in the center area?
Well, if they're focusing on fighting, they'll be close to the front line. They'll not be in the same city.
There could be multiple front lines.
Yeah, there could be. But that's the point. If from anywhere on the map you can get anywhere in the same amount of time.
I didn't say it would be the same amount of time. I said it would be roughly the same amount of time.
We'll have to wait and see how they kind of do ports. I think ports are going to be pre-generated. I don't think they'll have the tech to be able to have a character-built port.
100%
and so we'll have to see if they do ports only on the outer rings of the map, or if you can actually go in between the islands, assuming the islands don't physically connect, and whether they can go through. We
still have no idea
gap.
how any of that's working.
Right. So, I mean, like, if it's just ports on the outer edge, then we're talking about getting more around globally around the map and then walking to wherever you're going at a very potentially large distance.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I do think Svarty brings up a very interesting question here about having ways to stop organized groups from having multiple characters in the same zone so that they can attack a keep. Their first character dies, they just bring up the next one, log into the next one, attack the keep. That one dies, they log out, log into the next one. And I think this actually kind of applies on the flip side too of how to address that when, for instance, if we have long travel times so that you can't get to the battle, well, that's just going to encourage people to create multiple characters and have one stashed on this island, one stashed on this island, one stashed on this island, one stashed on this island.
Or, like I said, if you're making a support character, the speed class have 5 different locations you're kind of logged out in, different characters, and log in and be like, I have the speed buffs, everyone come to me and I'll get you there. And
which is part of the reason why I think that majority of the travel will be over land, because I doubt we're going to have a speed buff class for boats. And if the majority of your travel time's on a boat, that now suddenly the speed buff is useless.
Yeah.
boat minigame rowing. Just everyone in sync, hitting your mouse button.
I do think that
No.
they should try to do something about that, Svarty. I really don't know what they could do, unless they added some kind of a log off, log on timer that basically, if it looks like you're switching characters more than once, it tries to delay you or something if you were in a battle, or if you just died, it tries to be like, no, you can't log right back in. You've got to stay on here. Like a timeout, if you die, you log off, then it gives you like a 2-minute timeout or something. It's like, well, no, you can't do it.
Possible.
Which actually, now that I think about it, that could be a solution. It probably piss some people off, but
Most definitely, because there's quite a few fans of multi-boxing.
It wouldn't prevent the defender situation where someone could stash characters on multiple islands to deal with a battle coming up on those islands. But it would potentially deal with people just like you mentioned, dying and then logging off and attacking. And I agree, Svarty, that the closer a base is to your sanctuary, to your safe area, the harder it should be to attack. And that's part of why I mentioned that having the travel time be focused on land travel, and then having the nearer islands to your safe zone be bigger, kind of contributes to that, because then if you have people trying to swarm to your nearby islands to try and take a keep, they're going to have longer time to travel over land, whereas for you spawn closer to there, so you can kind of you can just hop over and then travel.
Looking at the concept map from the BSC video of the map, the islands are wider than they are, they're thin and wide, so you're not going from the wide end to wide end, you're actually going the opposite, the thinner distance to go inward.
The docks on each far end.
Right.
True.
Which they could
do. But then you would build your keep closer to the docks.
Because they absolutely could say, well, you know what? We're going to put the Viking dock on the left side and your dock on the right side. Of course, if they did that, there's a 3-realm battle, so that would be complicated.
Yeah.
So they probably won't do that. But
so much design time needs to get into this timing everything thing.
Yeah.
It's such a huge and important aspect.
Yeah, it's going to be a crucial aspect to think about.
There's so many things we don't know about that it's hard to speculate on. Because, for instance, like we've seen that map. In my opinion, that map that they've laid out in the BSC days doesn't work. Because of that. Because it's so long and stretched out, how does it work with docks? That doesn't even make sense to me. They'd at least have to make it kind of more average rectangle shape or something, instead of as like it is, kind of stretched out in like a banana. And vary up the size. And certainly they want to vary up the shape of some of the islands and things like that. So, I don't know. I don't know how they do any of that. I'm trying to go into chat and make sure I'm not missing people's stuff too much, but I'm talking a lot. They could also make it so that if you're logged out a certain amount of time, it moves you to Sanctuary. Like, I think they would have to probably do that, not like a short time. Like, it'd have to be like, if you haven't logged in this character in like 3 days, they get moved to Sanctuary or something. I think that would probably be reasonable.
Or if the keep gets taken.
Yeah, or that. But I'm thinking just so you can't like I mentioned, as a defender, go, okay, I have a character here, and here, so I can get anywhere.
Yeah, but if the moment the keep you're logged off at switches to neutral, you can't spawn in anymore there. If you log in, it's going to port you directly to the Sanctuary or to the next keep over.
I think it's unlikely you'll have to log out in a keep though. Because if you do that, then anyone who gets disconnected from the game gets shoved over to the Sanctuary when they reconnect. And that's going to be real crappy.
Like if you try to log out while you're dead, maybe it auto takes you, when you relog into that character, auto takes you to Sanctuary or something.
Yeah, well, and that's one thing. We don't know how respawn works. Which was going to be my next topic of question. And my final question topic, time to death. How long should it take to die in a battle as a player? Assuming you have maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour to get to a battle in the first place, with all this travel time business. If you log in the safe zone, you get to a battle. It takes you 20. Let's go on the side of not even like a lot of travel, but 20 minutes. Let's go moderate amount. You go 15 to 20 minutes to get to a battle. How long should it take you before you die?
I can tell you how long it takes me to die in beta testing.
not any at all. It's
I've
very
already
quick.
died 10 times in this conversation, so
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not long at all. So I don't think that's very representative though, because if
No,
it's
it's
like
not.
that, it's going to be awful to have any
It's
sort of
not.
travel time.
Let's see. Brother Love says 1 to 10 seconds. I think they're promoting a much longer.
Yeah, if it's that
Yeah.
short,
Yeah.
then there can't be any
More
travel
in
time.
minutes than in seconds.
If it's 10 seconds, then you can't have any travel time between deaths, because otherwise
Yeah.
you'll never fight in the game ever.
I think a minute is a good starting average for them to try to test, because especially with the other systems in reading what your opponents are doing, if you're dying in 10 seconds, those systems shouldn't even be in there to begin with, because you don't have time to even bother with them. So you have to be able to play the UI, or not play the UI, which is what they don't want you to do. Play the visuals and have time to react and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So a minute is a good at least starting point.
Yeah, and I think what we have to consider is, one, it's really hard to balance this in large part because you never know what you're going to get hit with. So we can really say, like, if you're fighting one-on-one with somebody else of a reasonable class that's not overpowered compared to your class that you're playing. So if like a mage is fighting another mage, how long should it take for one of them to die? I think a minute in that case is probably a good thing to say, because then if you consider something else, like, okay, what if it's a heavy fighter beating the living crap out of a mage? That's probably only going to take about 20 seconds, because the heavy fighter is going to beat the living crap out of him if he's in melee range.
Yeah.
And even more so, what happens if 2 or 3 mages shoot one mage? Now you're talking, what, 10 seconds?
One shots.
20 seconds?
Yeah.
You definitely don't want it to be a one shot, because the last thing you want is for someone to travel all this distance, get to the battlefield, and then go and die.
Yeah.
Right. It's be interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to tell, but I do think that's important for talking about the timing and travel, because really, ultimately, I think how long it takes to kill someone is highly dependent on what type of respawn system they make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If there is no respawn,
and the time back to battle.
Yeah, exactly. If there is limited or the ability to, if there's the ability to be respawned in the battlefield at all, then they can shorten that. They can lower that time to kill pretty significantly. But for what we've seen, it doesn't seem like that's likely. They haven't really said it's not going to be, but I still hope we're not going to have battlefield res. They did say they wanted
death to be punishing.
Yeah, so I don't want battlefield res, which means you at the minimum have to resurrect at the keep.
I also don't want that, at least not at the keep that's being that is under attack.
That would be my preference as well, as at least another keep.
Nothing's been so frustrating or more frustrating than us in SWTOR having really epic fights and pushing the other faction back to their point, only for them to respawn like seconds, as Strike was saying, after we kill them, and it just became an endless battle of us spawn camping, basically.
In
and that's not fun.
When you put the spawn camp inside the keep.
Oh god, I hated forward camps.
The forward camps inside the keep at all time, and you were like, you have an endless supply of defenders.
Yeah, I honestly think the most reasonable solution they can do is not have battlefield res, or have some form of very limited battlefield res, and have it so that in general the default method is when you die, you respawn at the next closest keep. Or you can choose to respawn at the safe zone. You can choose a different place, but the default would be spawning at the next closest keep that you control, and then having to walk. But there possibly being like a range limit, so you can't do it if the next keep is like 20 feet away. It has to be within a certain distance, at least a reasonable distance away. So you then have maybe at least like a 5-minute walk back, or a couple minute walk back to get to the battle, because that allows the enemy to circle around you and set up ambushes to kill your reinforcements. And I think that's very important for RVR, is for people to have the opportunity to not engage in the major siege, to have the stealthers be able to flank around and kill people as they're trying to get back to the battle to cut off that supply. For me, the definition of battle res is any time a healer or another character can walk up to your dead body and bring you back from the dead while you're on the battlefield. That's a battle res. So anything where you're in the middle of a battle and you can get brought back to life, I consider to be a battle res. I am generally against it for Camelot Unchained, though I'm not 100% against the idea of it in a very limited capacity. Like, if it has a long interruptible cast time, like, you know, it takes you a solid minute of a healer resurrecting you to bring you back, or if it takes like a ritual casting or something to bring like a number of people back,
Yeah.
or even if it's just like, oh, a healer has an item that they can use that is expendable, disposable, consumable, or something that can bring you back, so that there is a definite limit to how much that can be occurring.
Yeah. And it takes a while, and it doesn't bring you back at full health. Things like that.
Yeah, I'm willing to budge on it a bit, but what I really don't want is like, you know, WoW style res where you just go and you're back, bam.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ESO had it almost not quite infinite reses. But you know, if you died, you can just sit there and wait and hope that someone comes up to you and spends the 10 seconds to do the res action, and then you're back up. And
it's too easy, way too easy.
Yeah.
Because what it ends up in is these eternal siege battles. Then where you have a siege battle that becomes boring because you can never advance, or you advance so slowly to take the keep that it just feels like you're not even progressing. It takes 3 hours to capture a keep, and you're like, oh, we finally pushed them out. All right, I'm done. I'm tired. We spent an hour and a half doing this. I'm logging off and eating dinner now. This just took way too long to kill anybody.
Yeah. And yeah, for me, battle res has always been a very PvE centric mechanic. It's a raid mechanic, basically.
Yeah.
It's you have a boss that you know is gonna kill some of your raid members. You need a way to bring them back. That's not a PvP centric mechanic.
Yeah. I could see the battle res being limited to specifically the healer class, and also specifically as the divine intervention ability of healers, so that you get it once per lifetime. You know, once until you've died again, you can't use it. So you can do one person, and then once you die,
dying,
you get the ability to do it again.
Somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what would be very reasonable is having something like having a healer able to spend like a solid 30 seconds casting a resurrection spell that then has like a 5-minute cooldown, or having it be a divine intervention or something. I say spend like a 30-second cast time with a long cooldown, because then that healer is spending all that time resing one person instead of healing other people. So that's a very important decision to be making. Like, if you're really going to sit there and go 30 seconds of resing some guy, that guy better be pretty important.
Yeah. And then you have spell stability to factor in.
Most of the time, probably not
like
worth
that.
it. But you know, some limited deal where they could do that, I would be okay with. And otherwise, using essentially the planet side method, where your next nearest keeps that you control, you can spawn at.
Yeah.
But there's a limited pool of power depending on the size of that keep. If it's a tier 1 keep, maybe only 15 people can res there in an hour before it goes, nope, no more. Or maybe if it's a tier 2 keep, it can do 40 people, so on and so forth. So you start dying, you're using up the nearby resources until they're all burned out, and then you can't respawn on the island anymore, and you got to go to the next furthest island, or the next closest island, to start spawning and trying to come back over. Or you just say, all right, apparently we cannot defend this island, and we give up on this island, and we're going to go somewhere else.
The devout resing you with beer.
Yeah. Drink this.
Beer res.
Okay, guys, he can't handle his grog. Yeah, they're gonna let me just sit in the ground and be dead the whole time. That's what's gonna happen. I actually kind of, I don't play healers very much, but I actually kind of hate having res abilities in open world PvP, because I feel like it just really results in a lot of people being really pissy with healers, because they're laying on the ground like, res me! Why aren't you resing me? Come on, res me, dude! Quit running around healing other people and res me. And it's like, just go respawn at the next point and walk here. No, I don't want to. I want to res. Kind of asinine. I've seen it so much, mostly in pug groups, but yeah, they just sit there and they start being
Yeah.
real pissy
Oh yeah.
because someone won't res them. And I'm like, by the time you fussed about resing, you could have gone and respawned back at the other point and walked here. But you
Yeah.
don't want to have to walk here because someone might res you. Yeah, I actually really like the planet side method of having keeps be kind of tied together and important for capping other keeps. I think the only reason that probably wouldn't work in CU is because they're player made keeps instead of being positioned by the developers. But there's possibly ways they could do that, maybe with like upgrades or something. Some kind of agreement, or maybe like some kind of a keep upgrade you could build that
Alliance.
would link it to another keep or something.
Keeps built by people within the same campaign.
Mm-hmm. Or like if
On the
there's
same guild alliance
if
or
there's
something.
two keeps within a certain range of a keep, you can't cap it, or it has a longer period of time to actually take control over it or something, unless you've taken out one of those other keeps or something. I don't know. There are ways they could play with that would make it interesting.
Yeah.
I do actually like that aspect of planets. I actually miss playing PlanetSide sometimes. Sometimes. But then
the first one or the second one?
Either one. I was better at the first one, but But then I remember
I like the second one.
I remember the god awfulness of swapping back and forth keeps, and then I immediately go,
yeah. Oh yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if they have any tech that allows you to, going off connecting keeps you control to sending resources via like caravans to those keeps. And if that keep is under attack and you lose connection to it, you obviously then can't send a caravan to that keep. But it's going to be difficult for them
to
figure out.
At least the automatic one, player control caravan.
That's going to be difficult
anyway.
to figure out.
I do also kind of think that I was reading chat, so that's what distracted me back to this. I do also think that part of the good thing of having people spawn at other keeps is it kind of discourages having people trickle in as reinforcements. It kind of encourages them more to bulk up there and get together and
wait for the rest.
Because if you trickle in one or two at a time, it's really easy for three people to just stand out in the middle of a field and kill you as you come in. And some people are not smart enough to figure that out on their own. And so they're just like, I'm going to keep running out there by myself and getting killed.
When you've been picked up 3 or 4 times by the scouting groups, you should be able to learn.
The only problem with it compared to PlanetSide is PlanetSide had vehicles that made helped to kind of reinforce that, because the distances were so great between bases, that you could be like, I want a vehicle. Can somebody carry me? Can somebody carry me? And then if no one did, you were totally screwed. But if you kind of stand around and try to get in somebody's vehicle so you could ride there, and CU probably won't really have that. So
no.
They won't have horses.
Well, you could have somebody carry you with a speed class, basically.
Yeah.
If you're in the group, and depending on the buff radius, and how it works with groups or non-grouped.
Which that is one thing I really would like to see to some degree, is see them bring in some of the command features from PlanetSide. Where the squad leaders have all these different commands they can do. They can ping things on maps. They can set rally points for people to get together and kind of communicate pretty easily with people to rally at various points and set up squads and stuff. I feel like that's one of the things PlanetSide has done the best job with, and it would be nice for group leaders to be able to easily kind of congregate people like that. I do think strike, that actually is one thing I would be open to. Generally, I don't like the idea of a small group being able to go in and cap a keep and CU, but I would be open to them having some way to sabotage with, like, the scout, for instance. We know the scout's going to be able to sabotage some things, and we've kind of mentioned in other vodcasts having the scout be able to sabotage different elements of a keep. So it would be interesting if scouts could sneak inside of an enemy keep and temporarily sabotage their respawn capabilities.
They were talking about crafters being able to create a device, like the sappers being able to create a device that would do that.
Yeah, and if They could easily, like, if they could get that from like a crafter, and a scout could carry it into a base and basically set it up and be like, and their respawn goes
Yeah.
down. That would be pretty amazing.
Mm. But it's something that can be destroyed, and the scouts from the defending team can find them and destroy them.
Yeah, I don't think he much likes the idea of teleporting players around. I think
No.
everything's going to be fairly real time, if maybe sped up a little bit,
Yeah.
but never just going through a loading screen to go from location to location.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of feel like boat travel could be sped up, like not instant, but it could be sped up so that okay, traveling on a boat to a nearby island might take a little bit of time, like a minute. To a farther island,
Yeah.
it might take 5-6 minutes. I don't know what they would decide the time would be, but it shouldn't be taking a really long time of just sitting on the boat. There's no reason for it, unless they're really that dead set on adding naval combat later on. There really is no and even if they did, they could still, with a 5-minute boat ride, they could have another boat sink you in that span of time. It would really simplify it and make it complicated, or they have to change the travel methods or something later on. But that's a thing that's honestly, I don't think naval combat's ever happening in the game. So I think they're open to quicker travel, but not quick travel. Some ways to speed it up in certain respects, but not, no instant teleportation or anything.
Yeah, I mean, Sparty asks a good question on Trebs. On average, how many should be involved in a keep siege, compared to like the amount they're showing right now in the stress test for the Siege of Cherry Keep?
Yeah.
Like if you take an 8-man group, which is our group size, should every person in that 8-man group have a siege or trebuchet on them? Because I know when we were playing ESO, that was kind of one of our requirement items that our PvP team were asked to have. Everyone had a siege item on them. Is that even feasible in this?
I would hope not. I would say that for me, it should be more than, like, if you're sieging an actual keep, not just like somebody's little rinky-dink fort that's been plopped down, but an actual castle. Even if it's not a big castle, but an actual like defendable castle wall, I would think you should need more than a handful of siege to take down a wall in a reasonable span of time. You should need at least like 8 to 10 siege to take that wall down within a reasonable span of time. Now, if it's a really big keep, you should have a full raid, and you should probably have 15 siege or something lined up bombarding the crap out of those walls. But I don't ever really want to see it be a thing where like even half of a group has to have siege to take it out, because otherwise everyone is basically just having to siege. They've said they don't want fighters to have to take up siege and do stuff like that. They want them to be able to do other things.
Yeah. On that note, Trevel is saying that MJ has mentioned the idea of people having to carry a part of the trebuchet, not the whole trebuchet. So you have to have multiple people contributing to one. In which case, cool. For an 8-man group, I could see maybe 2 for every 8-man group or something like that.
Yeah, or maybe it takes 3 people for a trebuchet. So then that would result in 2 1/3 for like an 8-man group. Or maybe 2 and a scorpion. Maybe like 2 people and 1 or 2 scorpions or something. If your whole group was siege,
scorpions are going to be smaller, so should be able to be carried by 1 or 2 people. But the trebuchets should be only carryable through either caravan or in smaller pieces by 4 or 5 people.
Yeah,
because they're supposed to be big and doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, I would be fine with one person being able to carry their own scorpion. If it's it's still heavy, taking up a lot of inventory space if someone wants a scorpion.
In pieces.
But they can have one scorpion that they then build on site and put together, and I think that would be okay. We have talked about crafters and sieges before, not really in this episode. So I don't think it. I mean, it is certainly important for timing. We haven't discussed that for the aspect of building. We have before, not within this episode because we don't really have time. We're already like into an hour and a half at this point.
Yeah.
So I did want to see if anybody has any other major points though that they wanted to bring up that on kind of things we've already talked about before we kind of wrap things up here.
I mean, just the timing in general really has to be looked at. Hopefully soon, as far as beta testing goes.
Slightly
Yeah.
important.
I mean, I enjoy the testing.
It is major.
But when I'm sitting there in a trebuchet for 3 hours just doing that, granted the scenarios get refreshed. Ultimately, endgame, that's not going to be fun in a live scenario. So they really have to figure out just the time it takes to destroy these things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think timing is going to be a major thing they need to get right for the game to be fun, because it's gonna determine a lot of the elements of the game and how fun they are and how engaging they are.
And I imagine it's
so
going to take a long
it's gonna
time.
be yeah.
I imagine it'll take a long time to get that stuff right, and
Yeah.
that's why like it feels right now like the tests we're doing have no aspect of timing to them at all. They may,
Right.
but it just seems like for the most part we're just like kind of arbitrarily just destroying stuff, more so to just test the physics and mechanics of things. And it really feels like it feels like that timing stuff is going to take a long time to really do.
Well, to get it right, they need to test it a lot and do a lot of iteration on it to find the right balance.
That would be interesting. I don't think anybody's mentioned that before Strike, of building siege camps to build siege at the site and then start to use it. I think the only problem with that is someone would still have to carry the materials.
I think all the players would have the materials kind of on them, and you'd almost just like fill it up like an inventory.
Yeah. So then, I mean, what's the difference between people carrying parts of siege weapons and then carrying the materials for siege weapons to be built?
It's more just like a public pool of stuff. Everyone throws it in, and then anyone who wants to try to build siege can pull from it.
Which could be interesting because it would then potentially give the defenders a target to attack and destroy to prevent any more siege. So that could be interesting.
I mean, there could be, like, around the castle that's being sieged, there could be resources that crafters or gather crafters are
you don't even need a camp for that. Just a stockpile of materials that the crafters use to repair the siege engines, to make ammunitions for them, and things like that you will need to bring and store on the battlefield to be able to make them.
That's what I see. Yeah.
Okay. I think the only problem with having to build something and then gather the resources there to do it is then they have to make sure every island has the resources to build siege in pretty much every part of the island, unless they try to give the option to have both. A part of me still really would like to see trebuchets have to be built further away and then pushed to a site, but I think they've already kind of implied that's not going to be the case. But I would still kind of really like to see a siege group pushing like 4 trebuchets down the road towards a castle slowly, just while everyone else is flanking around them, trying to escort them there. There's a part
we'll get there eventually, guys.
Push.
There's a part of me just finds that image satisfying. Because that would make one hell of a PvP target in open field. You see like 10 trebuchets just moving down the road, and you're like, no, we got to kill that now. It would be pretty cool. I think that would make for some good dynamic PvP, but I kind of doubt it's going to happen. Anyway, I do want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out. I know that some of you have Game of Thrones to go watch. It may even be starting now.
I think it's another hour. We're close to it.
Oh, I don't know. I can smell my dinner being cooked, though. So I'm going to go take care of that because it has been a little over an hour and a half. We've had a pretty good, somewhat contentious, but that's good to have more discussion. So thanks everybody. We will be back in 2 weeks, maybe with a interview or a different topic. It's kind of to be seen.
To be determined.
If he's available, I'd be interested in maybe doing the interview coming up.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll reach out.
It's been a little bit since our last one, so I wanted to.
Yeah, I told him sometime
gap.
in May would be when we probably do that. So
Yeah.
So till then, we'll see everybody around, or see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.